Hi, I'm Tabby.
Our next outfit, come on over here, Tabbie. How are you? Thank you for being here. Let's see what we're working with.
I'm a very loving, fun person. Like every time you see me, you'll never see that I'm upset. I actually was doing my prerequisites to be able to apply to the nursing program right at the time that I got diagnosed. And I was also in the process of moving out of the Bay Area and into LA with my boyfriend. So everything had to be put on hold. But as the time went by, like I cried it out and I realized I'm like, I can't really let cancer determine who I am. I work swings, so I go into work at 3 and I get out by 1:30 in the morning. And at the time, I lived really far from work too, which was like an hour and a half away. So that drive was exhausting. So I assumed that's why I was tired. But I remember it was like on a Monday, I was doing this caregiving like job here in LA for this older woman. So it involved kind of lifting her off the chair and putting her like anywhere that she would want. And she was petite, but I'm also petite. I'm only 4'11". So I think the following day I had called out because I had like abdominal pain, but I didn't know if I was sore or if like it was actual pain. I just kind of ignored it. It was something that I hadn't experienced before, but I just like let it go until the next day, which was Wednesday. I had to fly back to work in the Bay Area from LA, and my abdomen hurt a little more, but it was like a weird pain because every step I took, I kind of felt my organs like as if they were inflamed. So, whatever, I flew into work. Um, and when I got there, I texted my boss, "Hey, is it okay if I go to urgent care once, the following person comes in? Because there's usually two of us at night." And she's like, "Just go now." So, mind you, I work at a hospital. I'm physically in a hospital, but I don't want to go to the emergency room. The pain is intense. When the doctor goes to palpitate my stomach, he couldn't even touch me because that's how painful it was. So I thought the worst. I usually see all these surgeries that come in, like twisted bowels, like dead bowels. So he's like, you need to go to the emergency room. So that's why I automatically thought that. And I like said it out loud to him. I'm like, do you think like it has to do with my bowels being twisted? He's like, I don't know, but you need to go get a scan done. So the hospital was like a 5-minute drive. So I went back to work, um, to the operating room, not the operating room, I'm sorry, to the emergency room in the hospital. And I feel weird because I'm in my scrub sitting in the waiting room. So people were just like looking at me and I'm like, yeah, I'm an employee, but I need healthcare too. Um, so that's when they finally took me in. They did a series of scans. They asked me questions. Because of my symptoms, which I only had the major symptom, which was the abdominal pain. I didn't have fever. I didn't have like diarrhea. I wasn't throwing up. Um, but they asked me if I was around livestock. I said no. Have I left the country? I said no. So they were wondering like, what could possibly cause my symptom. And they did an ultrasound, and that's when they saw that I had like kind of cysts, they thought. So then they asked me, they're like, have you been around a sick dog? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, the dog has been throwing up for like a day, but nothing like, horrible. They're like, that's what it is. It's the dog. We think you have like tapeworm. And like tapeworm. Okay. So then that's when they decided to do, I believe it was an MRI or a CAT scan, and they saw it in my pancreas and in my liver. So obviously they didn't tell me that. They still thought it was like tapeworm or something. I got admitted into the hospital, and obviously I was speaking back and forth to a bunch of doctors, and eventually that's why one of them came in and was like, "It's the vomit word. It's cancer." As soon as they diagnosed me and told me that I had cancer, I started crying. Like that's kind of a normal reaction for everyone. Um, because the first thing that popped into my head was, I'm gonna die. And it's still hard to talk about. Sorry. Um, because it's like how do I explain it? I had recently, a year before I got diagnosed, a friend who passed away from cancer. So that's the first thing that popped into my head. And obviously, no one should think that way, but unfortunately, that's the reality of things. So yeah, that's the first thing. I'm gonna pass away, like, cancer. Um, but as the time went by, like I cried it out and I realized I'm like, I can't really let cancer determine who I am. Um, yes, another thing that popped into my head was I'm gonna lose my hair. Immediately, I got on Amazon, I'm like, wigs. Um, my boyfriend's sister, she loves like to wear wigs just to like style them and everything. So one day I came over at her house and she's like, "This wig would look good on you." So it was like a kind of orange reddish wig that I put on and it had bangs. And I like tricked my boyfriend. I was like, "Look, I got my hair done." So he like looked at me with the face. I was like, "It's okay. I can just change it at any time I want." So I try to look for like the brighter things in the dark. Um but yeah, just a whole bunch of negative things popped in my head and like I realized what good is that going to do for me? Because I'm not that person. I'm not a sad person. I'm always like the life of the party. I'm always like making you laugh in the most uncomfortable like situations. I was still admitted into the hospital during all this. So the first day, yes, it was the CAT scans, MRIs, and ultrasounds. That was just like the night that I got there. The following day, I think I was in the hospital for 3 days because I didn't get discharged until Friday night. Um, and they wanted to do a biopsy on my liver, but with the scans, they realized that they were fluid filled. The tumors were fluid filled, so they were like, let's not mess with that. Let's go to the pancreas and look at the two tumors that you have there. So I was waiting around basically NPO for the whole day, and they finally brought me down to get an EGD done where they put me to sleep um, and put like a tube down my throat to be able to biopsy my pancreas. And I believe I got the results the following day, which was Friday, and I followed up the next week to do that test to confirm the type of cancer it was, which was neuroendocrine. Um, but it was kind of like a series of waiting game because initially they had told me it was stage one, unfortunately, because they could not test the liver due to the fluid filled sacs. So I remember getting that phone call and them saying like, we got the results back and unfortunately it's stage four. So it like metastasized to my liver. So from what I remember, I believe I had two large tumors on my pancreas and about 17 on my liver. I think when I heard it was stage four, it was a little more like serious for me because they hadn't given me any information while I was in the hospital. So the most that I could do was cry just because, I was sick. Um, but like immediately I ran to Google, Dr. Google, pancreatic cancer, stage four. And what I read on there was that, you know, pancreatic cancer is kind of the deadliest and people don't find out about it or get symptoms from it when they're at like the end stage. So that even scared me even more. Like, why am I on Google? Let me get off of this because it's not, doing me any good. Um, but I think I cried more when I heard it was stage four than I did when I was in the hospital, mostly because I was by myself and I didn't have like a circle of doctors. My surgeon initially told me like the whole goal of at the end goal would be to go through a Whipple procedure, but he would like to have chemo done first because he wanted to shrink the tumors as much as possible. So it'd be a lot easier to go in there. But he did give me some treatment options he was just trying to figure out first. One, it was like a clinical trial for, I don't remember if it was like a radiation, but he told me that obviously one of the risks would be potentially having a different type of cancer, potentially a blood cancer down the line. And I said, why would I want to treat this cancer and then, risk getting a different type of cancer in the future? And then he did give me um, another option, which was starting chemo pills. So oral chemo first, see how that plays out. And if that worked out, continue with that. And if it didn't, you know, start IV fusions with chemo. When they told me that I should potentially freeze my eggs, I was like, okay, let's do it. Because I'm 25, I don't have any kids. I would like to have the opportunity to have kids. Again, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what the process was. I had my first consultation. They explained it to me. They're like, okay, for potentially 14 days, you're going to be injecting yourself. You're going to be constantly coming in every other day to get an intravaginal ultrasound. We're going to get blood work every day just to monitor that everything is going well. And then, we'll send the medications to the pharmacy and you'll be responsible for that. So, hearing that, I was like, oh, this is easy enough. Didn't really think of what would entail with injecting myself, the hormones that you're kind of putting into your body. And nonetheless, the fact that I was terrified of needles, like just getting blood work itself was, the worst thing that could possibly pop into my head. So I was, you know, injecting myself, not realizing that my body's kind of going through that process of, you know, pregnancy where my body's changing or, I think my follicles or my ovaries at one point were so huge that they were touching. So that was painful in itself. Um, but I think the silver lining of that was when I would go in to get my ultrasounds done, the doctor would be like, wow, you're very fertile. Look at all these eggs. So I always thought that I was infertile. I don't know why that was in the back of my head. So hearing this kind of made me feel a little better. Like, okay, I now know that I will be able to have kids in the future, um, which you know, not an actual thought in my mind right now. My first like instinct is, okay, I got to cure this cancer, and then I can have a family. Um, but yeah, just going through the whole procedure, it felt like an eternity because of how my body was changing and all the hormones that was going through my body. I found myself crying a lot. I chose the option to do oral chemo, which when I researched it, it wasn't as aggressive. So I was like, okay, I can manage this. Luckily enough, my boss worked with me where I could do a hybrid position where I could work from home while I was on chemo and then while I was off, be able to go to work. How it worked was I was on chemo for 2 weeks and then I had a break in between for a week and then I started again. So for those 2 weeks that I was on the oral chemo from home, I was able to work from home and then the 1 week I would go back to work. So it was just constant back and forth. And I think I did that for about like 3 cycles and then it wasn't working. The tumors weren't shrinking. So then I got put on IV infusion chemo for another 4 rounds. And again, that still was not working. Um, so that's what resulted in immediately going into the Whipple because they wanted to, deal with the source before it got worse. Um, and I was terrified. I've never had surgery. I've never, broken a bone, sprained an ankle, sprained a wrist, nothing. I was never in the hospital up until now. So the idea of surgery terrified me because I didn't know what to expect. They told me that I would need an epidural. And obviously, the first thing you think of, epidural, pregnancy, pain, needle in your back. Like, I was like, I don't want to do that. But I obviously had no choice. I needed to choose life over, whatever fear I had in my head. So he explained to me with the Whipple that they would make an incision from like on like right in the middle of my chest to my belly button. He said essentially it's gonna be like the size of your iPhone, like this big. And I'm like, oh, that's not bad. Didn't realize that it was on your abdomen. That's pretty big. So he explained that it would be basically they'd take out my gallbladder completely. They would take a portion of my stomach, my pancreas, and my small intestine and basically group them together to make a new digestive system. As well, since I had tumors on my liver, he did a resection where they cut my left side of my liver because that organ is able to, grow on its own and regenerate after a good amount of time. So I was like, "Ooh, that does not sound fun. This is like the worst surgery you can think of." And he says it's a very, intense surgery. It could take up to 9 hours.
You know, sometimes with certain medications, like the epidural medications.
That I've seen him do these surgeries so many times that I'm like, okay, this should be a piece of cake for him. He cares about me. He trusts me and I trust him. Um, so I put myself a little more at ease. After the surgery, they told me that they were going to monitor me for now every 3 months to have a CAT scan done because the previous chemo treatment was not working. So there's no point in putting me back on a treatment plan that is potentially not going to work out.
Cool, yeah.
They did want to put me on some sort of hormonal injection every month, but I opted out of that because I said, listen, I'm still healing from my surgery. I'm still going through the motions of finding my new normal. I don't also want to be miserable and get an injection that, you can't prove that will work. So why would I put myself through that? I want to heal on my own. I want to, eat healthier. I'm how do I yeah, eat healthier and just, live my lifestyle in a more kind of cautious way, knowing that I had treatment and knowing that my body is very weak right now, rather than put myself through more pain and misery. So I still have about 14 to 15 tumors in my liver, but every 3 months I've been getting a scan, and thankfully enough, the tumors have been shrinking on their own without any treatment. Um, so essentially, he did want to have another liver resection to go in and try to do the right side of the liver in October, this October coming up. But I just had a scan done like 3 weeks ago, and it just continues shrinking. So I asked him, I was like, is there a need to do surgery right now, or can we continue, monitoring me every 3 months? And if it continues shrinking, you know, push off the surgery as much as possible. And he said, actually, that's not a bad idea. You seem to be stable. So we'll just keep doing scans every 3 months, blood work every 3 months, and, go from there. Since my Whipple, there's a lot of things that I had to learn not to eat. For example, broccoli. I love broccoli. I can't eat it because unfortunately it makes me gassy and the gas hurts. I get bloated like a balloon really fast. A lot of dairy products. I used to drink milk, just plain milk in a cup, just drink it. I really can't do that. I became kind of like lactose intolerant from it. Um, but the other difficult part of that is if I say I wake up in the morning, it's usually in the mornings for some reason. My stomach like wakes up. I would like drink a cup of water. I have to run instantly to the bathroom. I have something called dumping syndrome, where anything I eat, drink, I go straight to the bathroom and it all just comes out. So since surgery, I lost 20 pounds and I kind of remain there. Like I haven't gained anymore. I haven't lost anymore because everything I eat just comes out. Um, and it kind of sucks because I like to go on vacation now with my friends. Um, And I kind of get that worry that like, oh, I don't want to go out because if I eat, I need to have a bathroom within like 2 feet of me because I'm constantly going. And it sucks. No one wants to live like that. And in my head, I'm like, I'll eat, I'll go to the bathroom. I'm like, well, then that was expensive and it lasted 2 seconds. Um, but aside from that, I think I haven't, had any moments in my life that changed drastically. The chemo I kind of coped with, and I didn't let it take over me. I still functioned as normal as I could. Um, I still lived my life. I still went back home to New York, saw my friends. I still went to trips. I went to Puerto Rico. I went to Hawaii. I went swimming with the sharks. Um, It's only the Whipple kind of that made such a change in my life, but even then, I still am very hard-headed, and I'll, like, eat foods that I'm not supposed to and pay the price later, but it's because I'm home. If I'm outside, I won't do that. Um, and just I've been eating a lot of fruits. I stayed away from, like, the fast food. It doesn't do any good for you, and I feel disgusting after I do it. There's certain things like the gym journey, the gym era that I would love to, like, well, I continuously participate in, but there's certain things that I can't do. I see people doing Pilates. I have no core strength anymore, and if I try, it'll hurt me. I could possibly get a hernia. I can't participate in that, and it kind of sucks. Yes, I can do like an intermediate class where it's like for beginners and it's easier, but I would want to experience that. So there's a lot of things that I can't do anymore that, you know, I was able to before I had the surgery, before I had cancer. I have to be a lot more cautious than other people. I love to go on TikTok. I love to like do my own research. I found a support group on Facebook. I believe it's called Whipple Warriors. Um, and while I was going through my healing process from the Whipple, that page helped a lot because if I had questions, I would just pop a question in there, and I've had a ton of people like give me their responses and what they went through and what worked for them. So I was able to cope a lot with that. If I felt sad or I felt like in the dark, I'd pop a message in there because they can relate. Yes, I can run to my boyfriend and tell him I feel this, this, and this, but he wouldn't understand. So it felt a lot easier for me to speak to strangers, but they weren't strangers to what I was going through. So that was very helpful. And till this day, a lot of people, especially like on TikTok, I post like about my experience, and I've had people message me like, "Hey, I'm gonna go through a Whipple. Like, what do you suggest?" I'll give them my suggestions, but I also send them that support group from Facebook so that they can see everything that everyone's going through. They can ask their questions. They don't have to like kind of result to going to Google. You have to be kind to your body. You have to love yourself, but understand and accept the fact that you are sick. And depending on how obviously you take that and go from there, everything kind of is like a mental game. If you constantly say, like, you think the worst, like, I'm going to pass away, like, I'm sick, like, think the worst, you're going to put yourself in that mental state and you're going to feel sicker because now you're feeling depressed. Now you can't get up from bed. I forced myself to get up from bed every day. I forced myself to talk about it because it's one thing to like have those thoughts in your head by yourself and then talk about it out loud, and it makes you feel better because now, one, you let it out. Two, you're hearing what other people have to say, and those positive that positive feedback helps a lot. That's why I love the support group um, for Whipple Warriors, because I just gave an update for my 8-month Whipple post Whipple, and everyone was saying like stories like, "You inspire me, like you're doing great. I'm so happy to see that you're doing amazing. Like keep going, keep fighting. You're a warrior." And that within itself, it's better than like a compliment of like, "Oh, you're so pretty," or like, "Oh, you make it look so good," because it's coming from someone who is also going through the same thing as you. But it's for me, it's coming from older people, and I look up to older people. Um, and they kind of like give me to me, that's like a warm hug. They have a warm feeling.